Welcome. Good evening. Welcome to Spicewood Live. My name is Ray Jimenez and I'm part of the Spicewood Art Society. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing scholarships for young students of the arts in the Spicewood area. My understanding was we just did 6 more just this month. So it's working well. All right. I'd like to welcome you to our final show in the 24-25 season. Okay. As always, I'd like to give special thanks to Spicewood Vineyards for their wonderful support, and to Opie's Barbecue for their unwavering support in feeding these guys in the band and everything. And a special shout out to It's All Good, who went over and above to get here and get y'all some food too after a little glitch. Okay. I'd also like to give some thanks to the volunteers of the Spicewood Art Society that play such a pivotal role in making events like this happen. We don't work for anything, we do this because we like to do this, okay? So thank them, please. We're currently working on next season. We'd love to have some input in what your desires might be. There's all kinds of stuff out there and we're constantly looking for things, but we'd like to do what you want to hear, okay? That seems to bring you here. Yeah. All right, this brings me to tonight, and our show tonight. Tonight is Jazz Night. Every year we do a tribute to Tony Campise, and it is sponsored by the Motheral Family. Thank you very much for your support in doing this, all. Thank you. Okay. So, tonight, the Tony Campise Memorial Big Band, under the direction of John Mills, Michael Mordecai, and Chris Kimura. The Tony Campise Big Band is a celebration of jazz excellence, inspired by the unforgettable legacy of a saxophonist and flutist, Tony Campise. Okay. He's known for his virtuosic talent and his dynamic performances. Campise left an indelible mark in the jazz scene, and his music continues to captivate audiences around the globe. The band's powerhouse sound is further elevated by the remarkable vocals of Maddie Kay, tonight's vocalist. With a voice that seamlessly blends the depth of classic jazz with a contemporary flair, Maddie Kay brings a unique warmth and a charisma to the stage. Her ability to interpret the great American songbook, coupled with her dynamic stage presence, makes her the perfect complement to this rich, vibrant sound of the Tony Campise Big Band. Several other friends are obviously joining us tonight in this big band effort. I will not attempt to introduce all of them. I'll leave that to Mike and the guys here. So, please welcome the Tony Campise Memorial Band.
Thank you very much. As Tony Campise would introduce the band, he said on the piano, on the bass, that's John Frimkin. On the drums, that's Rob Fetson. On the piano, that's Ryan Davis. And then Tony would say, and I'm Tony Campise, the remains of Tony Campise, the big chunky parts. While Ray was announcing all the glorious things about Tony being a virtuoso and a world-class musician, he was all of that, but that's not what any of us remember him for. We remember him for his humor, his love, and his, I'll share my thing that was mainly what I remember him about, his incessant obsession to be early. everywhere he went. When he had a gig at the Elephant at 9 o'clock, he would be there circling the block at 5 o'clock to get the best parking spot. One time we were playing with Aretha Franklin in Dallas, and I told the guys, now you be at the McDonald's in Georgetown at 8 o'clock, because we're leaving. We'll leave you if you're not there. I turned to Tony, I said, we're leaving at 8:30. In fact, I'll give you $1 for every minute you're late. I got there about 7:45. He'd been there for 20 minutes. And I can't do it, Michael, I can't do it. He was a crazy man. But the next piece we're going to play is a song that we'll send out to Tony. It's called A Beautiful Friendship.
Oh, I'm up first. Well, I had the pleasure of encountering Tony at a pretty early age. Tony was like 10 years ahead of me in Houston. And while I was still in, middle school even, and playing at the jazz stage band contest, Tony was already like mid-20s hot shot in Houston and would often be the judge and a guest artist. So I got to hear and be impressed and thrilled by Tony for a number of years before I got a chance to meet him. And when Michael Mordecai and I would travel down to Houston to play at some jazz clubs with our original music band shortly out of college for us, Tony was around in the Houston scene and would always be extremely friendly and open and inviting, and would invite me over to his own gigs and to sit in, which was very generous on his part because it was over my head, musically at that point. But he was always so generous that way. And then it was just a few years later, Tony moved to Austin. And so I had a long time getting to play shoulder to shoulder with Tony, and continue to be inspired by Tony to this day. When he's at night in the Elephant Room and I'm playing, I still hear Tony on the sound system singing and playing, and it's like he's right here with us. He has made such an indelible mark. So grateful for Tony Campise crossing paths. So it's a great honor. Chris Kimura.
Yeah, Tony, let me see. I'm really long-winded. I'm going to make this really short. Because most of you have seen me talk about Tony before, and I can talk about him for days. I'm not going to do that. I will just say that he was my absolute saxophone hero, one of my musical heroes, and I begged him to teach me lessons. He was at a point in his life that he wasn't teaching lessons anymore because kids today suck, and he just assumed that I would suck too. But I had a way in. He would play at the Elephant Room, and he would bring 8, 9 different instruments, and at the end, and he was a little older, at the end of the night, he had to pack all that stuff and take it to his car. So my in was to help him pack up all these horns and carry it to his car. For 3 years I did that before he agreed to give me a lesson. Tony was just an amazing, of course, an amazing musician, but even more an amazing human being. Someone that to this day I still learn lessons from. I was able to study with Tony for 6 years. It was just me and him. I was his only student, and it started as once a month, then it was once a week, then we hung out every single day. And I learned a lot from him, and I recorded every single lesson. So if I'm ever missing him, and I miss him all the time, if you go to the Elephant Room, there's a big poster that Eddie Astrich took the photo, and it says, "Tony lives." And there's that same poster at my club, at Parker Jazz Club. And so I see him every day, and I think about him every day. And last night was another great example. We had another wonderful saxophonist from Houston, Warren Sneed, came into town last night. And the first thing that we talked about when he came in was Tony, because he knew Tony from Houston. So Tony's memory is going to live forever through all of us. Thank you all so much for being here. But I miss the crazy guy. I will say this because no one said it. He was absolutely batshit crazy. He swears that he was abducted no less than 3 times by aliens. And actually, I think he probably was, in all honesty. So, but just an amazing human being, and I feel so blessed. Someone said it, that I got to live on this earth the same time that he was here. So that's my Tony spiel. And I got it down to less than like a minute.
All right, this next tune we're going to dedicate to the main singer that we ever had with the Tony Campise Big Band. We're going to bring her out here. We're going to play this tune. This was written by Paul Baker, our Barry sax player. This is a composition and arrangement of a song he calls the Chanteuse.
One, two, three, four.
Now, if you would welcome our chanteuse to the stage with her accompanist, Eddie Hubble. Welcome, please, Miss Maybe Kay.
Hello, you lovely people. I'm so glad y'all are here. I'm glad I'm here. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me. I love it. We're going to start with a Count Basie arrangement. I'm a little late to the party. It's called I Just Found Out About Love. It's okay, it's never too late. One, two, in my arms, and I like it. Ooh, I like it. Oh, what a wonderful future I see. It's a one-time only. It's a lifetime deal. Somehow I feel that it's real. I can tell by the way I feel. Right now I'm living it up and I like it. You know I really like it. Hey, give me a clue. What's love doing to you? Looks like you could be like it too. It's a lifetime deal. Somehow I feel that it's real. I can tell by the way that I feel. Right now I'm living it up and I like it. I really like it, yeah. Hey, you, give me a clue. What's love doing to you? Looks like you could be like it too. So much. The first time I ever sat in with Tony's big band back at the Elephant Room in the, 1920s, I think, maybe, might have been. You know, I was wearing a dress, and literally my skirts were blowing up. And I felt like Marilyn Monroe in that famous scene where she's standing on the subway grate, and her skirts were, and it's all the hot air from the guys. And it was blowing my skirts up. It was pretty exciting, let me tell you. I came home and told my boyfriend that I had had this other experience, and he kind of gave me a funny look. We're going to do a wonderful Duke Ellington tune, arranged by Paul Baker, down there on the end. We're kind of keeping, my goal this evening was to keep it Austin-centric, and to have arrangers that are in the band, that played with Tony. I played with Tony. Tony played with me. You know, we played flute duets together at weddings. Yeah, we just have a lot of history. And so instead of me scat singing in the entire second chorus that Paul Baker was kind enough to write in, I wrote a set of words about Tony. And these guys are kind enough to drop out at measure 35. And there you go, guys, and let me sing. So, without further ado, here we go. It's called Don't Get Around Much Anymore.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Missed the Saturday dance. Heard they crowded the floor. Couldn't bear it without you. Don't get around much anymore. I thought I'd visit the club. I stopped at the door. They started asking all about you. Don't get around much anymore. Ooh, darling, I guess my mind's more at ease. Nevertheless, while you stir up those memories of the long days, I've done but one far. You know it's different without you. Don't get around much. I'm gonna sing a bit about my friend Tony. As in Campise, you know I like to call him Mr. C. He was a mentor and a friend, and I adored him to the end of his most remarkable life. Well, you wouldn't really know, cause he never really showed it, but he trained as a classical man. We thank our lucky stars he fell into jazz. It was part of the master plan. Tony, my friend, we honor you today. Your spirit lives on in these tunes that we just love to play. So rest in peace, Mr. C. We're mighty proud of your legacy. We keep the music going. Now we're showing all your place in history. And then we come back and we do a whole mess more of really great tunes. So, there's the bar. Get your wine bottles. You know what to do. This is lovely. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Ah, there I am. There I am. I wanted to point out that all the vests that these guys are wearing, they all belonged to Tony. Okay, Tony had this formidable collection of vests.
Yeah, we did not choose to wear these.
These are Tony's. These are Tony's. And I would also say about Tony that he never met a Hawaiian shirt that he didn't like. And when the first time I went to his house to pick up some music from him, I walked in, and instead of artwork, there's Hawaiian shirts hanging all over the wall, in hangers, from the doorways, from the lamps. There's Hawaiian shirts everywhere, and I'm looking around and saying, "Oh, Tony, this is some really cool art." He said, "Yeah, I can change it out anytime I want to." And I thought, that's very unique. That's wonderful. Here's an arrangement for you from Mr. Bill Ginn, another superstar in the Austin music scene who is playing music. He's a pianist, arranger, composer. He's playing music right now in heaven or someplace with Tony. And it's called Day by Day. this song, Tuxedo Junction, because I like it. Turns out, this was the #1 song on the hit parade in 1940, Glenn Miller Orchestra. Interestingly enough, Stan Kenton's big band, with which Tony played, recorded this in 1961. And so Tony would have played this song. And so in keeping it personal tonight, we're doing this tune, and it turns out Tony played it too. Is there a Tuxedo Junction chart in his book? Probably. And is it the Stan Kenton one? Do you know? Yeah. Paul Baker, did you write it?
I don't remember it.
Okay, we don't know. That's all right. There's Tuxedo Junction. that's one of the ones we did not actually rehearse. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen on the evening. So I wrote this little part in that I thought, well, that ought to work, and it did. Whew. Tony and I commissioned Paul Baker to write an arrangement of this next tune called Since I Fell For You. Wonderful tune. Written in 1945, I think, by Buddy Johnson. Made very popular in '63 by Lenny Welch. That was the quintessential version. And Tony and I didn't actually sing a duet. We traded sections back and forth when we did this song. And I don't know why we never sang as a duet, but he decided that wasn't what he wanted to do. And when Tony said something, I just said, you bet. That's great, I'm on it. It was his way. So, Eddie and Matey get to start this. Hang on, I need a little vodka. And you thought it was water. When you just give love and never get love, you better let love depart. I know it's so, and yet I know I can't get you out of my heart. So if you hear me going, whoo, that is actually how you clear your throat when you're singing. It is. It's offensive, it's loud, and it works. All right. Well, here's another local composer, not quite as local as he used to be. This is George Old J. You may remember George lived in Austin for many, many years, had a recording studio, great pianist, arranger, composer. His first claim to fame was writing the music for Wing Commander, the video game. The game and the movie. George wrote the music for it. And 1,000 years ago, he wrote this arrangement for Bye Bye Blackbird. And I sent, he lives in Western Massachusetts now, and I sent him an email and I said, hey George, we're gonna get to do this arrangement of yours, Bye Bye Blackbird. And he said, wow, that's a long time ago. And he found an old video that he sent me from about 40 years ago. It was his big band doing Bye Bye Blackbird, and it was Tina Marsh, another, may she rest in peace, who was the singer looking about age 18 or something in this video and just singing her heart out. And so I told George that we were going to do this for you tonight, and he said, that's lovely. We're honoring Tony. I feel really good about that. So here is Bye Bye Blackbird. Here I go out, sing. Bye. soul is made by in the middle of an allergy attack here in the show. Thank you, my dear. Hot water. Yeah. Hey, Matey. Thank you. A little hot water. This is really not vodka this time. Too bad. Oh, that's good. Well, we're gonna do one of my songs. And there's a reason. How are we doing? We're doing okay. I wrote this song back in 1988 with Rich Harney, another great Austin musician who has gone beyond. Great pianist, singer, songwriter, arranger, composer, prolific composer. And in fact, Chris Kimura is going to host at Parker's Jazz Club the 3rd annual Rich Harney Jazz Fest on Sunday, June 8th. Did I get that right? I did. And Chris's band will be the first band up, and then Alex Koch, who is Rich's longtime collaborator and has gone to all the trouble to keep this Rich Harney Jazz Fest going. Alex Koch's band will follow Chris's band. So that will be, please.
It's actually Ryan Davis. Is he still here?
I don't think so.
Yeah, Ryan, it's actually Ryan's trio, and the whole night is nothing but Rich Harney. I just get to plan it, but Ryan's
good.
Rich Harney.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah, that's great. So I lead a vocal trio called the Beat Divas, and we were out here in 2007. Anybody remember that? You do, Paul. I know you do. And last year we did the Rich Harney Jazz Festival, and one of our members, Beth Ullman, had been married to Rich for 11 years and co-wrote a lot of the tunes with him that we sang at last year's festival. And I wrote this one with Rich, and Alex didn't even know about this song. So I said, well, I wrote this song with Rich, let's do it. And so I arranged it for the Beat Divas, and Paul Baker, thank you very much, down there on the end, gave it new life for tonight for the big band. And it's appropriate, it's called Up Jump Spring. And the reason I really wanted to do this song is because when I recorded this, Tony played flute on the tune. And so if you go home at the end of the night, and when you're having your nightcap, you say, Siri, play Up Jump Spring by Matey K. And you will get to listen to Tony Campise in his most happy place. He defined the joy in this song. He really did. And that was something that Tony was particularly good at, reading a situation and bringing his particular sense of joy, which seemed to me to be boundless. I have a vision in a movie. It's a James Bond movie. It's Goldfinger. You know that guy, I think they call him Odd Job, who has that top hat with the steel, he goes around decapitating people, right? So it's in the US Mint at the end of the movie, and James Bond is fighting this guy, and he's flung his hat into James Bond, but James Bond ducks, and it hits this huge electrical cable. And so this cable is kind of snaking all over the floor, shooting out sparks everywhere. And that, to me, is the vision of Tony Campise on stage, okay? batshit crazy. Well, he might have been batshit crazy, but he brought a particular kind of enthusiasm to everything that he did that was remarkable and unique. And I can't tell you how many times he played on my stage and upstaged me, and I just stood there grinning from ear to ear because there was nobody like him. And he did everything he did without guile, okay? So, I'm gonna digress for a moment. I didn't know about the reason behind this, but Tony could sing 2 notes at one time. Have you ever heard, anybody ever heard him do this? I know you guys have heard him do this. Tony could sing 2 notes at one time, and he never would tell me how he did that. Paul, can I tell the reason? He had a split in his soft palate. And so if you want to find your soft palate, if you put your thumb on the roof of your mouth, that's your hard palate, that's bone. And if you move your thumb back to where it gets soft and mushy, that's the beginning of your soft palate that kind of goes a little ways down your throat. And Tony had a split in his soft palate and could sing 2 notes at one time. And so frequently in the middle of a sax solo on one of my gigs, he'd start singing 2 notes and people would drop their teeth. I mean, it was arresting. You know, and again, it was like, here is this unbridled joy and energy and zaniness and happiness. And he brought that to every stage. He absolutely did. So in Tony's honor, seriously, go home and listen to him play on Up Jump Spring, because that's the name of this tune. And thank you, Paul Baker, for a swell arrangement. Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
Jump spring in a single bound, she stepped in with her skirts of flying, kicked her heels as she left the ground, laughing, up jump spring. Up jump spring, she is pure coquetry. 1958, I believe. You all know the song, right? Fever. This song had so many lives. Elvis recorded it, Beyonce recorded it, Madonna recorded it. I could go on. But Peggy Lee had the quintessential version. Interestingly enough, she was never credited for the 2 verses that she wrote. One about Romeo and Juliet, and the other about Captain Smith and Pocahontas. In this version, in my book, Romeo and Juliet, alas, do not make an appearance. But Peggy Lee never got credited for this. So, we're giving her credit tonight. And we're going to feature Mr. John Fremgen, the troublemaker, on bass. Tony's favorite troublemaker, right?
1, 2, 3, 4.
I love you, never know how much I care. When you put your arms around me, I had a fever that's so hard to bear. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight. Fever in the morning, fever all through the night. The daytime, moonlights of the night. I light up when you call my name, 'cause I know you're on the train. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight. In the morning, fever all through the night. Everybody's got the fever. That is something you know. Fever isn't such a bad thing. Fever started on Smith and Pocahontas, but how very mild affair. When her daddy tried to kill her, she said, "Devil, don't you dare abuse me." With his kisses, even when he holds me tight. I his kisses, daddy gonna treat me right. Now you listen to my story. Here's the point that I have made. Girls were born to give you fever. You better let them send to break. They'll give you fever when you kiss them. Fever if they never till you sizzle. I love you way too much. I love you way too much. I said, "Boy, I love you way too much." We're doing fine on time. Okay, then I think in honor of the new exoplanet, we should do Fly Me to the Moon. Don't you think? What's it called? B12-something something 96. You read about this? You heard about this? They discovered a planet that is 420,000 years, I kid you not, away. In light years, I forget what that is, but it's 420,000 years it would take to get there, and they think that the elements for making life exist on this place. So we're just going to fly you to the moon. It's a lot closer. It's definitely a lot closer. Yeah. All right.
See what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. Oh, in other words, darling, kiss me, kiss me. Fill my heart with song, let me swing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. I love you.
Tony didn't know anything about this song, but I have to think if he were alive, he would have played a kick butt solo on it. This song grew out of a casual conversation. I'm a swimmer. I was swimming my laps, and the woman that shares the lane where I often swim, we stopped at the middle of our laps just to kind of chat. How you doing? Haven't seen you in a while, you know. And we got into what's called in our age group the organ recital. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, well, this hurts, but I'm still swimming. And oh my God, and I fell and I can't believe I sprained my neck. We were doing that. And so I just said, it is what it is. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, you get what you get. And then we went back to swimming our laps. And I'm swimming in the pool and I'm thinking, there's a song in there. There has to be a song in there. My mother had a favorite platitude for me growing up, which is nothing ventured, nothing gained. And that was the mantra from my mama. It's like, you put yourself out there and you try it, and if you fall on your butt, well, at least you tried. And so, I'm about to sing you the Platitude song, arranged for us today by Mr. Paul Baker. Once again, this is what, number 4 from Paul in this set. Very talented. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. That's exactly what my mama said. It's not the kind of life that really needs to be explained. Don't let it mess with your head. I say it is what it is. You get what you get. There's a lot of ways to say it. And yes, gratitude will do that. That's exactly what the big man said. You can deal with one better call and cliche or curse. Those folks are twisted my head. I say it is what it is. You get what you get. There's a lot of ways to say it. And yes, gratitude will do ya. It really nothing else will do. You hear what I'm saying? Too much latitude. Patience is a virtue. Slow, steady wins the race. Nice guys finish last. Pride comes before a fall. This is getting in my face. I say it is what it is. You get what you get. There's a lot of ways to say it. And yes, gratitude will do ya. Have you had enough yet? Well, that's good, because we only have one more song left in the set. And after that, we all turn into pumpkins. You are a lovely group of people. Thank you so much for being a splendid audience today. This is just so joyful. Mommy and Tony, all about him. It's a joyful thing. I had a few tears this evening in addition to the joy just thinking about Mr. Campise. We're going to be taking a chance on love. That's a good way to end the evening. 1940, this one goes back to 1940, by Vernon Duke. No pickups, clean intro.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Here I go again, I hear the trumpets blow again. I'm on the road again, taking a chance on love. Here I slide again, about to take that ride again. I'm starting again, taking a chance on love. I thought the cards were a frame up, I never would try. However, now I'm taking the game up, and that ace of hearts is high. Here's a blending now, I see a rainbow blending now. And how happy am I, taking a chance on love. Taking a chance.